Okay, so what I plan to do in today's lecture is tie up some loose ends on the topic of choice theory, demand functions, and so on. We've done the classical model. You've seen its main implications. uh, the main point is in today's lecture is that the classical model is, of course, restrictive. Been a lot of work uh, that has been done subsequently. There are other frameworks, other approaches, um, and yes, Janvi.
So the PPT is not visible. This Zoom window is visible.
Yes. I'll come to it. I'll come to it. Uh, okay, so these days, there's a lot of talk about behavioral economics, which is inspired by a lot of laboratory experiments that had been done. Two of the pioneers of the experimental approach are two psychologists, Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky. Kahneman won the Nobel Prize. It was unfortunate for Tversky. He had passed away before that. Otherwise, he would have been the co-winner for sure. So they did a lot of experiments where in sort of controlled environments and setups, it was seen that people don't always satisfy the axioms of classical choice theory, right? They violate some prediction or some axiom of it. Uh, and that has led to a lot of work. So instead of going too deep into these areas, I will talk about some of the so-called anomalies and we'll intuitively talk about it without going deep into some sort of rigorous modeling of those possible deviations. But I also want to show you one modeling approach, which is the quasi-hyperbolic discounting model, which will give you some sense of the kind of work that has been done, which deviates from, let's say, the classical model. Okay. Yesterday.
Sir, one doubt.
Okay.
Sir, so in this midterm, will all the modules will be covered from topic 1 to 5, or only topic 1 to 3 will come?
Certainly the first four. The fifth, I have to decide. I'll tell you soon, but be prepared for the first four for sure. Right. The third module will go very quickly in possibly one lecture.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. All right. So yesterday we were talking about cash versus kind, right? So as far as public policy is concerned, things like, welfare assistance to the poor given by the government or given by aid agencies, there's a number of issues, issues of paternalism versus welfarism or issues of externality. So we discussed all of those issues of, is there the architecture to give financial architecture to give people cash? So all of those factors matter. Let me very briefly talk about personal gifts. Okay. So in most societies, in most cultures, personal gifts are usually given in kind. Yes. And there seems to be a taboo against giving people gifts in cash. Now, as we discussed at the very beginning of the lecture yesterday, that there's a certain efficiency argument for giving gifts in cash, right? The core idea being that first of all, the recipient the flexibility of cash allows the recipient to choose the best thing according to her tastes or preferences. And the second thing is also that, that there's an informational advantage to giving cash, that if the recipient knows her preferences better than the giver, then that's another advantage for cash. Now, so the question is, why is there this seeming taboo against giving personal gifts in cash, right? It seems like something which is crass, something which is looked down upon. So I want to show you a video. I don't know if I will be able to make the audio work, but I'll try. Maybe what I'll do is that I'll redo the screen sharing. Can you hear me, guys?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Let's see if this works.
Maybe you won't like it.
Okay, can you hear the sound on the video?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
great, success. All right, so this is a clip from an American sitcom called Seinfeld. Some of you may have watched some episodes of it. This was the rage when I was in graduate school in America. Somebody has their microphone on. Please check the microphone, guys. Please mute yourself. Okay. So this is a little clip where, there's Elaine, the woman is called Elaine. It's her birthday, and Jerry is giving her a gift. And at some point, another friend, Kramer, will come in and give his gift. So see what happens.
Oh, how could I not like it? Of course I'll like it.
You could not like it.
Just the fact that you remembered means everything.
Of course I remembered. It reminded me every day for 2 months. Oh, the card.
Cash?
What do you think?
You got me cash?
Well, that's right. I figure you could go out and get yourself whatever you want. No good?
Are you my uncle?
Hey, come on. It's $182 there. I don't think that's anything to sneeze at.
Let me see the card. To a wonderful girl, a great pal, and more.
Hey. Oh, Elaine, I'm glad you're here. Stay right here. I'm gonna be right back. Stay.
Pal? You think I'm your pal?
I said, and more.
I am not your pal.
What's wrong with pal? Why is everybody so down on pal?
Oh, what is this?
Yeah.
You got me something?
Yeah, open.
Oh,
This.
Kramer! Oh, the bench! You got me the bench that I
It's pretty good, huh?
Great.
You remember when we were standing there and she mentioned it? I made a mental note of it.
Well, goody for you.
Oh, yeah. See, I'm very sensitive about that. I mean, someone's birthday comes up, I keep my ears open. So what'd you get her?
$182.
Cash? You gotta be kidding. What kind of gift is that? That's like something her uncle would give her.
Think where man's glory most begins and ends. And say my glory was I had such a friend.
Yates.
Okay. So, am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, so.
Okay. So, what do you guys think about this clip? So, that bench which Kramer gave her, it probably cost 20 or 30 bucks, right? It's much less than $182 which Jerry gave her. But she's very upset with Jerry's gift and just loves Kramer's gift. So what's going on here?
So maybe the woman's utility function involves sentiments.
Yeah, but we want to sort of pry that open a little bit more. Yeah. What kind of sentiments? I mean,
So it would
So
be
I
like
think
the other
the
person
woman
gave it a
loved.
thought for the gift. The one
Okay.
that gave the bench.
The person had his ears open when she was saying something, and I think that says that he cared for her, and maybe that
Right.
is what she liked.
But Jerry gave a lot of money, right? Doesn't that show that he cared for her?
So, but without a thought, he gave all that money. Like if you can't find a gift, you just give the money. Like you can buy anything you want, but it does not carry a thought behind it. Like you thought of that person while buying the gift for them, that they actually need it or something.
Okay. There's one
So
thing.
maybe,
Yeah, go ahead.
so actually, maybe what she liked was not the bench, but the thought. That is what maybe it's like the thought counted. Even if he had given her something else, not the bench. The bench actually is immaterial. What he gave, it's the thought that counts. That's why I guess.
Okay.
So maybe when it's not need-based, in-kind transfers are actually better than cash grants, as long as they're not coming out of, let's say, a need-based motive.
But I think it just shows preferences that the women prefers a gift more than cash. Kind of shows the preference that everybody is having
Yes.
preference.
Yes, but Rachita, that explanation makes it basically circular, right? That she expressed a liking for the in-kind gift. Now, if you want to explain that by saying that, oh, she just has a preference for in-kind gifts, then we are practically restating the observation, right? So what we want to think about is some deeper underlying reason why she was much more joyful about the cheap but in-kind gift, right?
So may I say something?
Yeah, Tristan.
So maybe some social expectation is at play, that we expect, like it's a social thinking, like it's ingrained in ourselves that we expect gifts to be in kind and not in cash.
Yes, but think about that explanation though, right? Then we can explain any kind of behavior by just saying, by invoking that, we have been conditioned that way, right? So the explanation becomes just too powerful. It can explain everything, every pattern of observation that we can come across.
Yeah.
Let me draw your attention to one sentence which appeared twice. Okay, so when Elaine first observes the cash gift, she says, "Who are you, my uncle?" And then when Kramer walks in and finds out that Jerry gave $182, he again says, "Who are you, her uncle?" So what is the significance of that? It's repeated, it comes up twice.
She expects her friends to give her a better gift than cash because they know her well enough. But she does not expect that from her uncle because her uncle is like a sort of a distant relative who does not know her. But
right. So when Kramer, remember his explanation for buying the bench, right? He says, when my friend's birthday comes around, my eyes and ears are open. I am observant. So Elaine, we were walking past a shop window and Elaine saw this bench and admired it. And I made a mental note of it. So the bottom line there is that I'm paying attention. I'm plugged in. I'm not indifferent. I'm not distant. I'm not aloof. I am well aware of what my friend might like. Yes. And Jerry didn't make that effort, right? He could be paying no attention at all. He could be just ignoring her and just handing out a cash. So I think there's enough clues in this clip to say that.
So excuse me, sir.
Just let me finish my explanation. Yeah, I'll come back. So I think there are enough clues to suggest that to some extent, perhaps this gift giving is a test for the giver, that whether he has paid attention, whether he has kept a tab on the likes and dislikes of the recipient, of the friend or the sibling or whoever it is. Now, distant uncles are not even supposed to know you that well. Yes, so that's why the test is irrelevant for them. Giving some money as a gift is innocuous. But if a close friend just hands out cash, it is as if he is refusing to take this test that whether he has paid attention, right? So giving a gift here has a signaling aspect. The giver signals that I have paid attention. I know what you like or don't like. Yes, it's not just an exchange of resources or material goods. It's a signal of how close the human interaction is and how much attention has been paid. So that, I think, and some of you were alluding to it by saying, thought was put into it. More specifically, I think it's this attentiveness aspect, which is reflected in Kramer's gift, but not Jerry's. So the broader point here is that, often sort of gifts or sharing of resources, it has other hidden kind of purposes. And in personal gifts, that's especially true. So that's something we have to be aware of. Yes, Samir.
Yeah, no, I was around the same line of thought. It's just that it's the social context and where the gift is being given, right? In a group of close friends, the transaction, it's not always a monetary transaction that makes up the gift. That's the exact point, right? Because if Seinfeld and Kramer were to go in a soup kitchen and give someone $100 versus a bench, the outcomes are obviously different there. It's not always something that we can say, it's always sentimentality. It's the social context which drives the value of the sentiment up.
Yeah. But the thing is that social context, sentiments, of course, they have a role to play here, but we want to be much more specific and concrete. Yes. What exactly is the sentiment? What exactly about the social context matters, right? One aspect about the social context which matters is the information, right? People who are close to you socially are supposed to have information about you, but if they have drifted apart mentally, emotionally, then they haven't been paying attention to your tastes, likes, etc. And when it comes to giving a gift or picking a gift, they may be caught out, right? So that's one of the purposes of the giving. So it is the specificities that matters, right? The terms sentiments or social context are just too broad. So they are relevant here, but we want to dig a little deeper and understand in precise terms what's going on.
Sir, it might have also be that Elaine must have felt that Jerry was trying to buy her friendship. The things like friendship and bonds and relationship cannot be bought. And Elaine must have felt that he was trying to bribe her to be her friend, be his friend.
Well, an in-kind gift, if it's expensive, can also face the same accusation, right?
But sir, in kind gift, there's some thought. There's
those are two independent things, right? One is, when you say, "Oh, she's trying to buy," then what matters is the monetary value of the gift, cash or kind. And you might say, if it's too expensive, then it may be counterproductive. But that's one line of thought, which is completely distinct from the other thing which you just said, which is that some thought was put into it, right? So I think it's the second aspect which comes out strongly over here. Not so much the first aspect. I think what she was upset by was not the amount of the money, that it was too large or too small. It was the fact that it was money. That's what.
Yes, sir. And sir, actually, Jerry didn't give her a gift because she was her ex and he didn't want to.
Well, at this time, I think they were dating.
They just started dating. I remember her.
So all the more reason he's supposed to be paying attention, and we have a close tab on what will excite her, what kind of gift. And he failed at that. Ganesh.
Sir, I agree with your line of thought, which you said about the attentiveness and effort eliciting behavior. Sir, I also saw one thing that if the woman in the video were very poor, I have not seen the entire sitcom, but if it have been very poor, then we might have seen the perverse outcome. Like he might have preferred money, the cash grant, in favor of the bench. So one prerequisite of these conclusions is that we have very well endowed couples.
Yes. So yes, it's true. So big monetary value, whether in cash or in kind, may signal a certain commitment. That if I am not serious about this relationship, this friendship, whatever, I wouldn't be parting with such big amount of resources. So that just the sheer value of the gift has its own signaling purpose, right? And that is often, in things like weddings and all that plays a role, or engagement and so on. But whether or not you know the recipient very closely, very intimately, that is another aspect of signaling which cash doesn't fail to fulfill. So I agree with you that a large amount of cash can have its own signaling role in some situations.
So that's what I was saying, that it might be the case that women might prefer cash in some cases. So what we can also relate it to preference, that that the other person know the preference of the woman, that she would prefer this. It might be the case that she prefer cash, but the other person knows that she won't prefer cash. So along with awareness and attention, I think preferences also play a role over here, that what she preferred.
Yeah. So as I said, a very big cash amount can have its own signaling role, but that's not surprising, right? This aspect which comes out in the, if one person gives another person a very extremely valuable gift, then it signals something, right? If it's a business partner, that means, oh, I am really interested in a long-term business arrangement with you. If it's a couple, then it's, if it's an expensive engagement ring, then that signals certain seriousness. So that aspect is there, but that aspect is relatively better understood. I think what comes out in this clip is this other aspect, that do I know you well? Yeah. In reality, if you take all kinds of situations, yes, both elements are there. But as somebody pointed out, these are pretty well-to-do couples, and $182 is a good amount of cash, but it's not like a fortune, right? So the signaling of monetary value is probably not a big deal over here. It's the aspect of whether the giver knows the recipient very well or has paid attention, which kind of pops out as the important element over here in this particular example. Yeah. Srota.
Yes, may I add to the point that Rachita made, like it depends on the preferences, because in the sitcom Friends, so Rachel didn't like it when she was given gifts. She always used to exchange that. So in that case, her preferences were not like that she would be excited to get
Yes.
gifts.
One size doesn't fit all. That's the conclusion. No. Okay. Anyway, all of these are true that some of you are bringing to the table. But I wanted to show the clip because, this particular aspect of, gifts as a signal of intimacy and knowledge is something a little subtle, and it's not immediately obvious. So that's why. Okay, let me move on. Because there's a lot to discuss. Okay, I'll skip this one. I'll talk about it when I talk about choice under uncertainty. Sunk cost. Did I talk about the pizza experiment?
No, sir.
Okay.
No, sir.
So, we talked about sunk costs, right? And the basic principle is sunk costs ought to be ignored. Now, in real life, do people overlook sunk cost? The answer is not always. So here's an experiment which Richard Thaler conducted. So it was in collaboration with Pizza Hut. So Pizza Hut was offering a deal that you pay an entry fee, a flat charge, and then you can eat as much pizza as you like. Right? They were doing it in one of their outlets. Now, after people came in, a randomly selected half of them were refunded the entry fee. Okay, so their entry fee became zero. They didn't know it at the time they paid the entry fee and come in, but they got a refund and it became zero. And for the other half, the control group, there was no refund. Okay. Now, what do we expect to happen if all agents are rational agents? We expect that, well, once you are through the door, whether you paid $5 or $10 or $0 shouldn't matter. Every pizza slice you eat carries a price of zero. So you eat till you're satisfied. Okay. So the two groups, the prediction would be, the two groups would on average eat the same number of slices. We don't expect to see a difference, right? Because whether they ended up paying $3 entry fee or $0 is a sunk cost to them, so it shouldn't matter. It turns out in the experiment that those who got back the refund ate significantly less pizza. Those who didn't get the refund, whose entry fee remained at $3, they ate more pizza. So they were influenced by their sunk cost. That's the point. Okay. So that's a kind of straightforward failure of rationality of choice. Yes, people are influenced by sunk costs. That's what this shows, at least in this context.
Sir?
Yes.
So the money they got back was before they ate the pizza or after they ate the pizza?
After they came through the door, outside the door, all of them thought that the gate fee is $3. Right after coming through the door, some of them were caught by surprise. They were giving back the $3 they paid at the door. They said, "Oh, your name came up in the lottery."
Okay.
And then they proceeded to the counter to choose their pizza.
Okay.
Sir?
Yes.
Sir, I saw an experiment on the same grounds. If you have heard of it, the movie theater experiment is also the same, right? Like halfway through, if you think the movie is not good, then what do? Since you have already paid for it.
Yeah.
So in that case, sir, what do you think would be the answer? Would that sunk cost there matter?
I mean, the answer can be posed as a normative question as well as a positive question. Normatively, should it matter? No, it shouldn't matter. You know, I've wasted an hour. The movie is lousy. Well, I'm not going to get back that hour, so I should rationally choose what I should do in the next hour, right? If it's really bad, then I should avoid the loss of another hour. But what do people actually do? Well, sometimes they're influenced by the fact that they have sunk in that cost, right? They'll grit their teeth and sit through it because they feel that, you know, what a waste. I paid so much money and didn't watch half the movie, so I'll endure and watch to the end.
So in the first argument, we are comparing it with an opportunity cost of that next hour, right?
Yes.
Like what opportunity cost does it have for the next hour? So even in this case, if you look at the opportunity cost of eating more pizzas than you actually need to, then if a person takes that into account, then the decision might differ than what they actually did. Like eating up a lot of pizzas than they need to, just because they paid for it. Like if they think about it rationally and think of the opportunity cost that it might come with, suppose illness or food poisoning and everything, then the decision will be influenced, right?
Once again, we have to make a clear distinction between the normative question here and the positive question here, right? Normatively, what should they do? Should it influence them? The clear answer is no. Positively, what do people actually do? Are they actually influenced by this? I mean, this experiment shows that yes, they are. Now, if you're questioning the normative thing, like should a rational person be influenced by how much they paid? I don't see why there should be.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Sir,
Yeah.
can I say one thing?
Yes.
Like initially, they thought with $3 they will eat pizza, but when they came to know that they have the $3, so at that moment they can think that they can eat pizza and something else. So to keep that, so eat all this thing, he decided to reduce the consumption of pizza.
It's possible, but I mean, you're basically invoking some sort of wealth effect, right? That's unlikely. This is Pizza Hut. All they have sell is pizza. It could have been in a more sort of, as we say, multi-cuisine restaurant that the people who were refunded the money had, they had a fatter wallet, and then they bought something on the side, like, French fries or salads or something. And so they ate less pizza. That's your argument. But I don't think it holds here, because this is just Pizza Hut. It's the only item they sell. Pretty much. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, let me move ahead to another example. I don't see, let me just rearrange this thing. Anyway, the screen disappears for some reason. Okay, here's a little story. This is taken from Amartya Sen's article called Rational Fools. There are two friends, call them Laurel and Hardy, and they have two cakes. One is a big one, the other is a small one. All right. They don't have knives or something, so the cakes cannot be divided, cut up. Yes. So they're indivisible. So one of them has to eat the big cake and the other has to eat the small cake. Take that as a given. So Laurel asks Hardy to choose who should get which cake. And Hardy takes the big one himself and gives the small one to Laurel. And Laurel gets very upset. So he says to Hardy that if I were doing it, I'd take the small one and give you the bigger cake. And Hardy responds, that's what you've got. Yes. What's the problem? You would have taken the smaller one yourself. I've given you the smaller one. So why are you upset? So what's going on here?
So in the last line, does it mean Laurel's preference does not depend on the consequence?
Yes.
Oh.
Yes. So I'm asking a question which I've already provided on the slide. I do this constantly. But so here's the thing about this charming little.
Sir,
yes.
Is this about altruism? Like the other person is more altruistic about her own utility,
It is precisely not about altruism.
Okay.
But I think it's about etiquette, that when you are dividing something and there are different proportions, you are ideally supposed to, according to social norms, take the smaller proportion for yourself. That's what people believe.
Yes. So in a sense, Kriti, the question is what underlies the social norm? Because to invoke a social norm, again, can explain everything, right? Every pattern of behavior, interaction, people getting upset, we can say, oh, it's become some social norm has been violated. But that only postpones the question just a little bit. The question would be, why has such a social norm come into existence? What is the underlying motivation for society to impose this sort of expectation? Right.
So there can also be this reason that because Hardy is the one who is choosing, then Laurel maybe he may be thinking like if he is choosing, then he will choose the best for himself, and then I will get only what is left over. Maybe because of that, he'll never be satisfied.
What you raise is let me come to the point at the end. If I don't, remind me. Okay, let me first finish with the point that I was. It's an interesting point, I think, which you raised. Kanishk.
Sir, I would like to answer the question which you were saying, that what leads to the social norm, what is the basis. So
Right.
suppose this experiment is done on the aggregate basis, and this pie is like this cake is like a national income. And if everyone, if we ask everyone what kind of income they want, and if everyone wants the biggest piece, and there might be some groups which is left with nothing. So that's kind of thing we see on poorer countries, like we have
No,
so
but
much
here,
inequality.
wait a minute. Here, the inequality is built in, right? One of them has to have the smaller cake, the other has to have a bigger cake. By construction, equal division is not possible. Okay, so the only question is, let me finish answering that. The only question is, who will be on which side? Okay, of course, people don't want inequality, maybe, but those issues are not quite relevant here. They're kept out because one cake has to be big, the other has to be small. That's a given.
Sir, I was referring to the intention that if we try to make a more a society in which the candidates prefer to have more equal resources to everybody, the outcomes will be better. So the focus is on the intention of each individual.
But the question here is, the inequality is a given, right? Either you are at the receiving end of the inequality, you have the smaller share, or somebody else will be. So the question is who? I understand that people may have a desire for making things more equal, but in this example, that has been disallowed by the way the example has been set up.
Okay. Okay. So we have to allocate one person to the smaller one.
That's right.
Okay.
I mean, of course.
I think we invoke etiquette because either we want to come out as the bigger person. We want people to think that, oh, I gave myself the smaller cake, so I must be a good person. Or we want, let's say that I give myself the smaller cake. Maybe I expect that because when people see that I've given myself the smaller cake, they might offer the bigger cake. So it could be that.
So the point is, of course, yeah.
I think Hardy is not thinking that what the other person is going to feel if I will divide the cake in such manner. So Hardy is not thinking the aftermath, but on the other hand, Laurel is thinking about the aftermath, that if I divide in such a way, how the other person is going to feel about it. So I think this is thinking about that aftermath, maybe it's coming in their decision making also.
Sure, there is a follow-up there, which obviously Laurel choose not to take into account. But it's not hard to see the basic motive behind Laurel getting upset, right? Maybe, as somebody just said, if you take the small cake yourself and give the larger cake, it's a signal that you are not utterly selfish, that you can think about others, you can be generous. So Laurel is upset by the fact about not so much getting the small cake itself, but what it signifies. Okay, but here's the important thing. What comes across in this example is that what Laurel cares about is not just the consequence, not just the final allocation, who got the big cake and who got the small cake. That's not what he's upset about. What he's upset about is the process. What is important is that the big cake was grabbed by Hardy himself and not given to him by Laurel, right? That makes a difference. So the process matters in this example. Now, if you go back to our framework, right, we have utility functions in which what is put inside the utility function is the allocation, right? What vector of goods do I have? Now, it is very easy to extend this framework to incorporate altruism, or what Sen in his article calls sympathy. Okay. You could, in my utility function, you can throw in how many apples I consumed, how many oranges, and how many movies I saw. But you could also throw in the apples and oranges and movies consumed by my friends, by my neighbors, by my relatives, by my classmates, and so on. Nothing stops us from doing it. Okay. So there is nothing in the classical framework to say that we are assuming utter selfishness. You can easily accommodate altruism. What you cannot accommodate in this sort of utility-based approach is this example, right? Here, what matters is not what the allocation is at the end of the day, but how it came about, who made the choices, and what that means. So the real limitation of the framework we study is not the assumption of selfishness. It does not assume selfishness. You don't have to. Okay. But the real limitation is the assumption of consequentialism, that what people care about at the end of the day is who is getting how much of each good. Sometimes they care about more than that. And that is what is difficult to fit in. Okay. So sometimes, the critics of this sort of classical economic theory have too narrow a view of what it really assumes or what limits it imposes on human behavior. But sometimes the defenders also put too narrow an account. So that's what I'm trying to bring out over here. Question was it Manish?
So does here the sense of authority or the power to make some decisions play a role here?
Yes, it plays. So now we can kind of unpack what is, why exactly Laurel is upset. Maybe he's upset because he has learned that his friend is A, not very generous, B, doesn't care about social expectations, he doesn't care about Laurel's feelings, and so on and so forth, right? But it could also operate through, this guy, when he gets power, he abuses the power. You can sort of spin many variations of the story. But for the point that I was trying to emphasize, what matters is that for one reason or another, Laurel cares about the process, not just about the outcome. Yeah. On why exactly he cares about the process, we can imagine several strands, including the one. Yeah, Rina.
Does there exist some economic instrument that can actually account for consequentialism, or have we not reached there yet?
What do you mean by economic instrument?
Like, okay, maybe economic instrument is not the right word. So for example, we have the utility function to represent preferences.
Yeah.
So does there exist something like that?
Oh,
that
you mean
some
okay.
representation?
Is there an analytical framework which takes that into account?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yes, there is. I mean, there are some. Not too much work has been done on it. There's a famous paper by Matt Rabin on fairness in economics, which is not exactly this sort of thing. I mean, it's in this direction. There's also a paper by Paul Romer, which tries to model Kant's notion of categorical imperative, which is somewhat non-consequential as a philosophy. Yeah, so there's some work.
Okay, sir.
3 Strota?
Sir, in our quantitative methods, we used to maximize the quantity of a good. But this example indicates that it's a relative quantity we should be focused on.
No. It does not say it's just relative quantity matters. So if Laurel had made the same division, he would have been fine. It's when Hardy makes that division that he gets upset. So it cannot be explained by relative inequality, because if that's what Laurel cared about, then when he got the chance to divide the cake, he would have taken the bigger one, but he's not doing so. So if his sentiment was, I don't want to, fall behind my friend in material terms, then when he had the power, he would have taken the bigger cake, but he wasn't. So it's more than relative consumption or inequality aversion. Yeah.
Sir?
Yeah.
Sir, can we say like which one comes more natural in social behavior? Is it consequentialism or is it non-consequentialism? Like,
well, clearly there's both, right? I mean, of course, consequences matter a great deal. I mean, nobody will say that they don't matter at all. Right? They're probably the most important thing. The question is whether that's the only thing that matters. And there, the clear answer is no. If you're talking of larger social issues of inequality and so on, there are two views, right? One is equality of outcomes. There's equality of opportunity, broadly speaking. One view is that, at the end of the day, we shouldn't have a big gap between poor and the rich, no matter what. The other view is that we should give everybody an equal chance of getting rich. And then if some people get rich for whatever reason, perhaps their own talent and hard work, then so be it. That inequality, right? What we should really try to create is a level playing field. So these are two different views. And the second view is not a consequentialist view, right? Or at least if you think of consequences as incomes or wealth, it says that I don't per se care about, how much inequality of income there is, as long as it came about through a fair process. Now, there's a lot of debate can be had about what's a fair process, what's a fair starting point. But these two broad lines of thought can be associated with the philosopher John Rawls and Robert Nozick. Right? Nozick took the view that if you tell me how much inequality there is in a country and ask me to judge it or to say whether this is good or bad or should be corrected, I won't be able to give you an answer because I need to know how it came about. What was the economic legal system? Did every citizen get the same opportunity to become rich? So there you see in some of the major social debates, this tension between a consequentialist approach and a proceduralist approach, if you will.
so is it like we start from consequentialist approach and then we go to a more subtle non-consequentialist approaches? So is it like that?
No, I mean, it is an ethical choice. I mean, there's no correct answer whether we should be consequentialist or non-consequentialist. Ultimately, it's an ethical axiom. The point right now that I was trying to make is more of not a normative point, but a positive economics related point, in the sense that there is evidence that some people sometimes, enough times, think beyond consequentialism. Economic agents perhaps in some areas also care about the process. Yes, so that's a more of a factual claim, if you will.
Yes, I got it.
Whether you and me should take a consequentialist approach or not, I mean, that's up to debate. That's ultimately subjective.
Yeah, right.
Okay, moving on. I'm not sure I'll be able to do the model today. Not too much time left. Okay, now beyond this sort of process, caring about process, people do care about others, okay, in this more straightforward manner of altruism or generosity. But It's more complicated than that. So here's an experiment. I talk about this sort of thing more in my optional course in the second year, but I've pulled out a little piece from that. So there was this experiment on blood donors in this university hospital in Sweden. So the students there were divided into 3 groups for the purpose of the experiments. Treatment 1 or group 1, they were asked, do you want to give blood? Because they had opened a blood donation camp on that day. So do you want to give blood? No rewards were offered. Okay, yes or no answer. The second group were asked the same question, do you want to give blood? But they were offered $7. They were offered some money if they gave blood. And the third group, they were told that if you give blood, we'll donate $7 to a charity of your choice. Okay. Now, in which group do you expect the biggest response, the most number of yes responses? What does our standard theory tell us?
So treatment 2.
Treatment 2.
Followed by treatment 3, followed by treatment 1, right? If you think of this as a supply curve, treatment 2 is offering the highest price, followed by treatment 3 and followed by treatment 1. Notice that in treatment 2, if you really wanted the money to go to charity, you're still free to give it to charity. But if you want to buy a cappuccino, then you're free to do that too. It gives you the flexibility. Okay, now, here are the actual results. And it turns out that the behavior of, men and women differed on this. The pattern in men kind of conforms to theory. That's the white bars, right? The highest response from the second group, not a major difference, but a little bit of a difference. But at least for the female subjects, you see a very unexpected shape, right? In the second treatment, when money was offered, the positive response fell from 50% to 30%. That's a substantial drop, but it went back up when the money was to be tied to a charitable donation. Okay. So the question is, what's happening here? What's going on here? Anybody?
So that men are selfish and women are not?
Well, first of all, no, I don't think we can draw that conclusion. I think we can draw the conclusion that on the whole, women are more generous because the bars for women are higher, right? So you can make that argument. You can, so neither group is purely selfish or purely altruistic. But what I'm focusing on is why, and forget about the men-women division, it's there in the paper, but why at all for anybody will the response rate drop when they are rewarded for what they're doing, they're being paid for what they're doing?
Because I think they attach some...
Sir, it changes the way they think about the process. Like they are now associating it with the reward they are getting. And initially they may have a different...
They might feel that being paid for something like this, it kind of degrades the sanctity of the action.
Also, so they might be concerned about how others perceive their choice. So if they choose to get paid for it, like they might be concerned about how their peers view it as like a selfish act and not really done out of charity.
Yeah. See, we have multiple motivations for doing good things which are helpful to others, etc. One is that we care about others. We are generous, actually. But another motivation is also to appear generous, to make it clear to our friends, neighbors, fellow citizens that we are good people, that we care about others. So if there's no reward on offer, and I donate blood, and I, volunteer in the homeless shelter, soup kitchen, what have you. There's nothing I'm gaining out of it materially. So it's a very clear signal that I'm a generous soul, that I'm a good citizen, I'm a good Samaritan. But when they're making a payment, the message gets very muddled, right? Then maybe I'm not a generous soul, I'm just a cheapskate. I'll do anything for $7. So that possibility creeps in when money is put on the table. And so this has been talked about a lot, studied a lot. So, there are papers by Benabou and Tirole, two papers, one paper which is particularly relevant to this. And in the 1970s, actually, it turns out that there was a big debate between big economists like Robert Solow and Kenneth Arrow on the one side, and on the other side, the sociologist Richard Titmuss and philosopher Peter Singer. So the Singer and Titmuss, they were saying that the British system of voluntary blood donation is actually a superior system and produces better results than the American mixed system, where paid blood donation is allowed, paid blood giving is allowed. And Solow and Arrow countered with basically the objection that supply curves are usually positively sloped. So if you pay people or allow that possibility, then the generous people may still just give it for free, but some less than generous people may give it for the money. But what this experiment shows is that there's complex social signaling which is going on. And so if payments start being made, the generous people might back off. They might think that this is not a signal of our altruism, it's a signal of our greed. And that might actually stop them from giving blood. So yeah, so as you see in many of these examples that I'm talking about, there are subtle informational reasons why people's behavior sort of depart from what a very simple standard sort of theoretical framework would suggest. So when you study game theory and information economics in the second course, next semester, that'll give you a lot of tools with which you can understand some of this stuff. Okay. Another example, there's a famous experiment called the ultimatum game. Okay, some of you may have heard about it. So this is an experiment which have been played numerous times in the lab. So there's a proposer, there's one player is called a proposer, the other player is called the receiver. The proposer there's a common pot of money, which has to be divided between the proposer and the receiver. So the proposer makes a proposal how to divide the money. So if there's 100 rupees, the proposer says, I'll take 70 rupees, you get 30 rupees. And then the receiver can say yes or no. If the receiver says yes, that's how the money is divided, right? 70-30. If the receiver says no, then nobody gets anything. Yes. Now, if you play this game and if you assume that people are rational and selfish, right? They want to maximize their own earnings. Then what will happen, what should happen is the proposer should basically walk away with everything. The proposer could say something like, I'll take 99 rupees, I'll give you 1 rupee. How about that? And the receiver then faces a choice between 1 rupee or nothing. And 1 rupee is better than nothing. So the receiver should say yes. And anticipating that, the proposer should indeed make this extreme proposal and it should go through. That's what we would expect if people were money-minded, selfish, and rational. The experimental results show that most of the time, the proposals, first of all, are close to 50-50 split, right, in the vicinity. The median offers are higher than 40%. to the other guy. And for the small subset of cases where the proposer tries to get away with a big share, like 70% or more, the rejection rates are actually very high. So as a proposer, even if you were totally selfish, you should be very wary about proposing extreme divisions, because it's very likely to be rejected. So the ultimatum game shows that totally selfish money maximizing behavior in a rational way doesn't seem to be going on with most people. And this is also true. You see this okay, let me show you another example. You may kind of be amused by this. Okay, I'll have to do a lot of changing. Let me stop sharing for a moment. Oh, it's there. Okay, let me show you another clip.
Experiment that I want to.
Okay, is the sound working?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So this is from a talk by Franz de Waal, who's one of the great primatologists. He studies primates like chimpanzees and some monkeys. So he's giving a talk about an experiment his team did. So let's watch it.
I mentioned to you is our fairness study. And so this became a very famous study, and there's now many more, because after we did this about 10 years ago, it became very well known. And we did that originally with capuchin monkeys, and I'm going to show you the first experiment that we did. It has now been done with dogs and with birds and with chimpanzees, but with Sarah Brosnan we started out with capuchin monkeys. So what we did is we put two capuchin monkeys side by side. Again, these animals, they live in a group. They know each other. We take them out of the group, put them in a test chamber. And there's a very simple task that they need to do. And if you give both of them cucumber for the task, the two monkeys side by side, they're perfectly willing to do this 25 times in a row. So cucumber, even though it's really only water in my opinion, but cucumber is perfectly fine for them. Now, if you give the partner grapes, the food preferences of my capuchin monkeys correspond exactly with the prices in the supermarket. And so if you give them grapes, that's a far better food, then you create inequity between them. So that's the experiment we did. Recently, we videotaped it with new monkeys who had never done the task, thinking that maybe they would have a stronger reaction, and that turned out to be right. The one on the left is the monkey who gets cucumber. The one on the right is the one who gets grapes. The one who gets cucumber, note that the first piece of cucumber is perfectly fine. The first piece she eats. Then she sees the other one getting grape, and you will see what happens. So she gives a rock to us, that's the task. And we give her a piece of cucumber, and she eats it. The other one needs to give a rock to us. And that's what she does. And she gets a grape. And she eats it. The other one sees that. She gives a rock to us now, gets again cucumber. She tests the rock now against the wall. She needs to give it to us. And she gets cucumber again. So this is basically the Wall Street protest that you see here.
Okay. Yeah, so monkeys are humans too, I suppose. Okay, so we have try to sum up what we have discussed. Um, a framework in which we assume that people only care about their own consumption vectors is too limiting. This is obviously not true if you look out into the world and into many different problems, domains, etc. People care about how much others consume. That sometimes take the form of altruism. I care about it in a positive way. Sometimes it takes the form of envy. I care about it in a negative way. A lot of this, for example, straightforward altruism can be easily accommodated in the kind of framework that we have built, right? Instead of just throwing in your own consumption vector into the utility function, you can throw in, other people's consumption vectors. You can throw in various things like, how many whales are saved, how many children in Africa are saved from disease and death, and so on. Okay, we can care about a lot of those things, which are not necessarily my own material consumption, and we can start accommodating this. It becomes harder and harder beyond the point, especially when the sort of social concerns of our agents become non-consequentialist in nature. That's when we start taking, we start hitting the limits of the framework that we have built. Sometimes people care about these kinds of, consumptions, divisions, allocations through signaling, right? What it signals about various things, like, if my friend is making a very unequal division, what does it signal about his attitudes and how much he cares about me? Or if my friend is giving me a gift in cash rather than kind, what does it signal about, how close a friendship is this? So sometimes consumptions are not just important in themselves, but they're signals of various underlying social interactions. So that's what I have tried to illustrate. There's one sort of very popular sort of quick term which people use, which is, behavioral economics, which I don't like. Many of the interesting papers in so-called behavioral economics try to explain why the behavior seems to be anomalous, at least if we look at it through the lens of standard price theory that we have learned over here, right? Instead of explaining it in a circular way, it tries to sort of unpack the box. And I think we can often, in most cases, understand it not as people's foolishness, as the outcome of some sort of folly or stupidity of people, but subtle underlying motives of the kinds that I have discussed through some of these examples. The last thing which I'll do, for which I don't have time today, is I'll talk about time inconsistent preferences, and there I will actually do some modeling, and that'll give you some flavor of some modeling approaches that we can take to understand so-called anomalous behavior. Questions? Shohan.
Sir, the researcher who was showing the case of the monkey experiment, he was saying that this behavior has been seen in monkeys, dogs, and I can even say cats in my own experience. But the thing is, these behaviors have come down over thousands of years. In all species, we can discover this. So there must be something that works for the evolution of these species, which is why it has sustained over so many generations. So if our rational, so-called rational theory or models in economics cannot explain it, we shouldn't be calling them anomalies or mistakes. Maybe the mistake is in our model itself, that we are not able to properly explain them.
Sure. I mean, anomaly, as I said, the drift of what I was saying is to say that these are not lapses of very intelligent behavior. These are intelligent behaviors. It's just that we have to look at it through the proper lens to understand them. So yeah, I mean, so the spirit of what I'm saying is not to portray them as anomalies or lapses.
Sir, also I want to bring up another point was that the case where the Swedish experiment, where with regards to blood donation, when you first asked us what our rational thinking would suggest which treatment would work the best, most people said treatment 2 would be better than treatment followed by treatment 3 and then treatment 1. And we shouldn't disregard the fact that in the case of males that has persisted in the experiment's observations, but in females that was not the case. So maybe, sir, our rational models of today are highly geared towards males because they have historically been created by a majority of males. So I feel the problem that we are not able to explain the female behaviors because of a lack of female participation in model building with regards to human behavior. So what do you think, sir?
What do the ladies feel? I think let's ask the ladies to throw some light on this.
So can I weigh in here? I mean, I actually agree what Shohan said. I think I agree, but also I also think that whenever an experiment like this that is analyzing women's behavior, it also comes down to how women have been conditioned in society to be, let's say, more generous or more benevolent, and we're sort of raised with this nature that you're the caretaker. So I think that also plays some part here in the experiment.
Yeah, so there are gender differences, sometimes we see in some experiments. I wouldn't, and then, to the extent there are gender differences, there's the nature versus nurture question. These are very hotly debated issues and so on. Let me just say that I don't think there's overwhelming evidence that there's a huge difference in behavior between men and women. I mean, that's not an aspect which I wanted to underline here. I wanted to underline the fact that, the payment can actually trigger quite the opposite reaction from what we expect. I mean, that happens with men too in other contexts, right? I can, in my second year course, I discuss a lot. So if you look at the sort of totality of evidence of many different things, many different cases where you observe this sort of perverse reaction, not perverse, sort of opposite reaction from what is expected. It's not exclusive to women. Now, yeah, to some extent, sometimes, some gender difference is found. My view is that I think we should, for the kind of modern societies that we talk about, as fundamentally there's no difference. I would rather operate on that prior. Sometimes differences crop up contextually in some cases because of maybe social conditioning and differential social roles and so on and so forth. But absent very strong evidence and overwhelming evidence, I would rather stick to the assumption that there's no essentialist difference between the genders, between the races, between whatever big groups of humans. Yeah. Anything else?
Sir, in the entire course, when will we get an opportunity to inquire the ethical perspective, the ethical lens, and the processes which have led to the anomalies? We
have discussed. Today's lecture was about that, wasn't it? I mean, did I?
But sir, we are majorly in the what we are expected to do is to learn classical theory well for the exams. Like, were we going to test on the anomalies on the exams as well? We have to.
There's a mandate I have, right? I cannot cook up a completely new course, which is, I mean, we have been talking of norms and conventions, so I have, to some extent, I have to stick to norms and conventions. So my job is to teach you the classical framework. I am bringing in a lot of stuff. I'm trying to give you a sense that there's a big field outside that fence. But obviously I won't be able to thrash it out, or, I mean, there are, through your 2 years of masters, it will take a lot of courses in my course, then there's I don't know, political economy of Oniba. We try to, I mean, you'll get a lot of opportunity to explore many of these sort of exotic things.
Okay, sir.
Within this course, I mean, it's one course. After doing the core material, there's not that much time to spend on these things, but I'm, as you can see, I'm trying to bring in some of these features.
Yes, sir, sure. Thank you.
Okay.
Sir?
Yes.
Yes, sir. There was